The ocean breeze carried a mix of salt and champagne, the kind of air that only exists in places people call exclusive. Mom always said this resort was above my class. Funny thing? She was right, back then. Now I stood on the very balcony she once said I'd never afford, watching her unpack her designer bag in the suite that bears my name, the Amelia view. Yeah, that's right, Amelia. That's me. The girl who once cleaned beach cabins for tips now owns the five-star resort her mother used to dream of visiting. I didn't plan this reunion. Life did. She arrived last night with her book club, not realizing her daughter, the disappointment, was the owner of the place she'd bragged about for years. I could have told her at check-in. I could have smiled and said, "Welcome home, Mom," but I didn't. Not yet. Because this story didn't start here, on marble floors and ocean views. It started way lower, literally and emotionally. See, when she said, "You don't belong here," she wasn't being cruel. She was being honest in her way. She believed in boundaries, social ones, financial ones, emotional ones. And I was the messy dreamer who didn't fit in any of them. Back then, class wasn't just about money. It was a label that defined what I could or couldn't want. And all I wanted was more. More than our two-room apartment. More than late-night arguments about bills. More than being told that ambition was showing off. But this moment, standing here watching her admire the resort lobby, wasn't revenge. It was realization. Sometimes people tell you what you can't have because they're afraid of losing the version of you they understand. And sometimes proving them wrong isn't about pride, it's about peace. She still doesn't know it's mine. Not yet. And when she does, it won't just be a shock, it'll be a mirror showing how far both of us have come. You want to know how the girl who couldn't afford a weekend getaway ended up buying the entire coastline? Let's rewind. Back to when I was serving drinks to guests who wouldn't even make eye contact. Back to where it all began. Welcome, story lovers! From where are you watching? Drop your city name in the comments so we can see how far our story travels. Before the ocean views and champagne mornings, there was a one-bedroom apartment with leaky walls and the sound of neighbors arguing through paper-thin ceilings. That's where I grew up. Not poor enough for sympathy, but not comfortable enough for pride either. Mom worked as a receptionist at a local dental clinic, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, smiling at patients who barely noticed her. She wore the same pair of black flats for 5 years, patching the soles with duct tape when they tore. And still, she looked down on anyone who wanted too much. In her world, dreaming big was just another way of saying setting yourself up for disappointment. Dad wasn't around much. He left when I was 13, said he needed space to find himself. Funny how people always want to find themselves away from responsibility. I remember standing in our kitchen, watching Mom fold laundry while telling me, "Amelia, we're not the kind of people who end up in magazines. Be realistic." That word, realistic, it haunted me. It was like a polite way of saying stay small, but even then I wanted more. I didn't know what more looked like exactly, but I knew it wasn't the hum of our broken refrigerator or the smell of bleach that lingered on Mom's clothes after cleaning shifts. In high school, I loved architecture. I used to sketch buildings on the back of grocery receipts. I'd design hotels in my notebooks, places with big windows and infinity pools. While other kids drew hearts and doodles, I drew dreams. Teachers said I had talent. My guidance counselor said scholarships were possible. Mom said, "We can't afford those kinds of dreams." Still, I applied. Got into a small state college. For the first time, I felt like maybe I could rewrite our story. Trade limitation for creation. But life doesn't wait for your plans to bloom. It storms right through them. Halfway through my first semester, Mom got sick. Nothing dramatic at first, just fatigue, dizziness. But it turned out to be something much bigger, anemia and a heart condition. The bills started rolling in before we even knew what hit us. And just like that, my college dream turned into hospital visits and overtime shifts. I dropped out. Not because I wanted to, but because she needed me. And when I told her, she cried. Not out of gratitude, but guilt. She said, "You were supposed to have a better life than this." I told her, "I will." But inside, I wasn't sure. The next few years were survival on repeat. I worked at a beachfront cafe, serving tourists who spent in one meal what I made in a week. Sometimes they'd complain that their drinks weren't cold enough while I counted coins to afford rent. There's a kind of humility that comes with being invisible. You start to move quietly, like life's background music that no one listens to anymore. But I kept sketching. On napkins, receipts, even cardboard boxes behind the counter. Dreams don't die easily, they just go into hiding. There were nights I'd stand outside that very resort, yes, this one, watching its glowing windows from the parking lot. The laughter, the music, the smell of luxury. And I'd whisper to myself, one day, I'll walk through those doors for real. I didn't know how. I didn't have a plan. But I had the kind of hunger that keeps you awake longer than fear. Then came the year everything truly fell apart. The cafe closed without warning. The owner vanished overnight, no paychecks, no goodbyes. Mom's health declined again. We were 2 months behind on rent. The landlord taped an eviction notice to the door like it was just another memo. That night, I remember sitting on the floor beside Mom's bed, holding her hand while she slept. The city lights leaked through the blinds, and I made a promise, not to God, not to the universe, but to myself. I'm done surviving. I'm going to build something that can't be taken away. The next morning, I walked to the resort's hiring office with my only decent outfit, a white shirt that didn't fit right and shoes that pinched my toes. The position? Housekeeping. 12-hour shifts. Cleaning rooms for people who didn't even notice I existed. At first, it stung. I was cleaning the very floors I once imagined designing, but over time something changed. While others wiped mirrors and folded towels, I studied the building, how it was built, how it ran. I learned how the reservation system worked, how guests were treated, how problems were solved. Every day became a class. Every mistake became a lesson. And every tip I earned went into a secret envelope labeled Future. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't fair. But it was progress. Because behind every clean room and every polite smile, a vision was forming, one that no one could see but me. And that's where it began. The quiet transformation. Not the kind that makes headlines, but the kind that grows in the dark, watered by exhaustion and quiet defiance. People saw a cleaner. I saw a student. They saw limits. I saw blueprints. The same hands that scrubbed floors would one day sign ownership papers. But that part of the story was still miles away. Back then, I was just a girl with aching feet, a stack of overdue bills, and a dream so fragile it felt foolish to say out loud. Still, every night, I whispered it anyway. One day, I won't just work here. I'll own it. It started like any other evening. Humid air, aching feet, and the distant clatter of wine glasses echoing through the resort corridors. By that time, I'd been in housekeeping for almost 3 years, long enough to know which guests tipped well, which managers were kind, and which ones pretended you didn't exist. The world runs smoother when you're invisible. People talk freely when they think no one's listening. That night, I was cleaning the executive lounge after a private meeting had ended. The chairs were still warm, the smell of cigars clung to the curtains, and someone had left a laptop open on the conference table. Usually I'd shut it and move on. But something caught my eye. An open email with the subject line, Construction Budget Revision, Urgent. Curiosity isn't always safe, but it's always powerful. And for some reason, that night, I let my eyes linger a little longer. The email wasn't meant for me, but the words. They burned. Adjust the numbers to justify the overspend. Keep the report clean for investors. Adjust the numbers. That phrase hit me like a cold wave. I didn't know the full story yet, but I knew enough about money and morality to feel my stomach twist. I closed the laptop, finished cleaning, and walked out. But the thought wouldn't leave. I'd seen the resort cutting hours, slashing pay, delaying bonuses. They said business was slow, but that email whispered otherwise. For the first time, I saw cracks in the marble floor, not literal ones, but moral ones. And I couldn't unsee them. The next day, while changing linens in the VIP suites, I overheard 2 managers talking near the balcony. One said, "The new investor deal will clear the books. No one downstairs needs to know." Downstairs, that was us, the invisible people. That night I made a decision. Not a dramatic one, not yet. But I started watching, listening, learning. There was one person who noticed something different in me. Marcus. He worked the night shift at reception, a calm, quiet guy with a degree he never got to use. He saw me one night sketching hotel layouts on the back of a supply log and said, "You ever think about being on the other side of the front desk?" I laughed. "I don't even have the clothes for that side." He grinned. "Clothes are temporary. Vision isn't." He became my first believer. He'd sneak me leftover management training notes, copies of scheduling forms, vendor contracts, anything to help me understand how things ran behind the scenes. And I learned, fast, but knowledge comes with danger. The more I understood, the more I realized how much was being hidden. One afternoon, while cleaning near the accounting office, I found a trash bin filled with shredded invoices, names of contractors I'd never seen, payments that didn't match any real repairs. And all of them signed off by the same person, Mr. Dalton, the resort's general manager. Dalton was polished, sharp, always smelling like cologne and condescension. He treated the staff like chess pieces, useful until replaced. When rumors started about financial restructuring, I knew he was behind it. Still, who was I? A cleaner with a mop and a dream. But I also had something he didn't, a reason to care. I started collecting little pieces, notes, receipts, fragments of overheard conversations. I didn't know what I'd do with them yet, but I knew someday they'd matter. Around that time, the resort announced a staff scholarship program. It was for employees who wanted to study hospitality management, one full sponsorship. For me, it felt like a sign. I applied, poured my story into the essay, growing up poor, working my way up, dreaming of designing resorts someday. A week later, the winners were announced. It wasn't me. It was Samantha, Dalton's niece, a new hire who'd been there barely 3 months. I smiled when they posted her photo in the break room. But something in me cracked quietly, because I realized it wasn't just bad luck. It was bias dressed up as professionalism. That night, Marcus found me sitting by the service elevator, eyes red, hands trembling. He said, "You can either let this break you, or you can learn how the game works and beat them at it." I remember whispering, "But the rules are made for them." He said, "Then stop playing by theirs." Something shifted that night. For years, I'd been waiting for permission, to be seen, to be chosen, to be enough. But what if I didn't need permission at all? Over the next few months, I started freelancing. I offered to design small renovations for local motels using free software and makeshift sketches. Most ignored me. But one owner, a retired contractor named Mr. Ramirez, saw potential. He hired me to redesign the lobby of his old property. It wasn't much, just a few $100s. But when I saw my ideas come to life, I felt alive again. Word spread slowly. A few referrals, small projects, enough to keep me dreaming. And with each one, I saved a little more. Then, fate, or irony, came calling. The resort went up for partial sale. Dalton and the investors had overextended themselves, juggling books until the numbers didn't dance anymore. They were desperate for silent partners, new investors who could bring fresh money without asking too many questions. Marcus found out first. He looked at me one night and said, "You've been studying this place for years. Maybe it's time to stop studying and start owning." I laughed, but he didn't. He showed me a small business program offering loans for women entrepreneurs in hospitality. It sounded impossible. But then again, so did everything about my life up to that point. I applied, half in hope, half in disbelief. Weeks went by. No response. Then one morning I got an email. Application approved for review. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. It was the first real door that wasn't slammed in my face. But when Dalton found out, he laughed. He cornered me near the staff entrance and said, "Don't embarrass yourself, Amelia. You clean rooms. You don't buy them." He didn't even raise his voice. He didn't have to. His words were sharp enough. I went home that night furious. But beneath the anger was something else, fuel. I'd spent my whole life being told where I didn't belong. Maybe it was time to build my own place and belong there. The next few weeks were chaos. I spent nights filling forms, learning about business loans and pitching to small investors. Mr. Ramirez even vouched for me, saying, "She's got the vision of an architect and the grit of a janitor." That's rare. Still, it wasn't easy. One bank laughed me out of the room. Another told me to come back when you have collateral. But I didn't give up. Because by then, this wasn't about a building. It was about becoming the person Mom, Dalton, and the world never expected me to be. Every no became a stepping stone. Every rejection, a quiet promise. And when the approval finally came through, a small loan, but enough to start, I cried so hard I had to sit down. That was the moment everything changed. Not because I was rich, but because I was free. For the first time, the story wasn't happening to me. I was writing it. But change never comes without cost. And I was about to learn that success has enemies too, especially the ones who wear smiles and silk ties. 3 years after scrubbing floors and folding towels, I found myself standing outside the same boardroom I used to clean. Only this time I wasn't holding a mop. I was holding a folder. And inside that folder was the truth. The air in the hallway felt heavier than usual. My palms were sweating, but my heart was steady, like it had been waiting for this moment its whole life. I could hear them inside, the resort's executives, investors, and of course, Mr. Dalton. They were discussing new ownership structures, which was corporate speak for covering tracks. I knew because I'd seen the books, the fake invoices, the money funneled into shell accounts. I had proof. Every lie wrapped neatly in spreadsheets and signatures, and I wasn't just armed with evidence. I had something stronger. Fearlessness born from survival. I knocked once, then pushed open the door. Dalton's voice froze mid-sentence. The room went quiet. 12 suits turned to look at me, the cleaner they used to ignore. "Excuse me, Amelia," Dalton said with a smirk. "This is a private meeting." I smiled. "Then you might want to keep it that way. For your sake." He blinked. "I beg your pardon?" I stepped forward, placed the folder on the table, and flipped it open. Inside were pages, copies of emails, invoices, and transfer receipts, each one marked and highlighted. "Let me save you the trouble," I said, my voice steady. "You've been stealing from the investors, padding budgets, moving money into ghost companies. And before you try to deny it, these are your signatures." The color drained from his face. The other executives exchanged looks. Dalton laughed nervously. "You have no idea what you're talking about. You're just what? A cleaner." That word hit differently this time. Cleaner. It used to hurt. Now it felt like a weapon. "Yes," I said. "A cleaner. Which means I know how to remove stains, including the kind that ruin reputations." One of the investors, a woman in a gray suit, leaned forward. "Where did you get this information?" I met her gaze. "From the trash bins your manager thought no one checked." Dalton slammed his hand on the table. "This is nonsense. You've been snooping through confidential documents. You'll be fired for this." I took a slow breath, savoring the irony. "Actually, you can't fire me," he frowned. "And why's that?" "Because," I said, pulling out one final document, "as of yesterday, I'm one of the new owners. I closed the investment deal with your silent partners last night. You work for me now." The silence that followed was almost sacred. The same man who once told me I didn't belong in the boardroom was now speechless, his power dissolving in real time. Dalton's voice broke through, shaky this time. You set me up." I shook my head. "No, Dalton. You set yourself up. I just cleaned up your mess, like always." The woman in the gray suit reached for the folder, flipping through the pages. Her expression hardened. "Is this verified?" she asked. I nodded. "Every transaction, every forged signature. Copies have already been sent to the authorities, and the media." Her eyes flicked toward Dalton. "Then this meeting's over. Effective immediately. You're suspended pending investigation." He tried to argue, but no one listened. For years, his voice commanded the room. Now it was just noise. As I turned to leave, Dalton called out, "You think you've won? You'll drown in this business, Amelia. You don't belong here." I paused at the door, looked back, and smiled softly. "You said that 3 years ago, remember? When I was mopping this floor. The difference is, back then you were right. Now, this floor belongs to me." I walked out to the sound of murmurs, half shock, half respect. The same walls that once echoed orders now echoed silence, the kind that only follows truth. Outside the boardroom, Marcus was waiting. He'd been pacing for half an hour. When he saw my face, he didn't need to ask. He just grinned. "So," he said, "did you burn it all down?" I laughed for the first time in months. "No, I cleaned it." He handed me a small envelope. Inside was a note from the bank confirming the final transfer. The resort was officially under new ownership, Amelia Holdings, LLC. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but instead I felt peace. Quiet, heavy, beautiful peace. Later that week, the story hit the local news. Corruption exposed in coastal resort. Whistleblower becomes majority owner. They called me a hero, but I wasn't. I was just a woman who refused to stay invisible. Days later, I found myself back where it all began, the staff entrance. I ran my fingers over the old security keypad, the same one that used to stick when I clocked in late. It still beeped the same way. But this time, the system recognized me as owner. I walked through the lobby. The chandeliers sparkled brighter somehow, or maybe it was just me seeing them differently. The housekeepers looked up, surprised. Some smiled, others whispered. They'd seen me clean rooms beside them, break down in storage closets, dream out loud when no one else did. Now I was their boss, but I didn't want to be above them. I wanted to be proof. The next week, we called an all-staff meeting. I stood at the front facing everyone who'd ever been overlooked. "I know what it feels like," I told them, "to be invisible, to be told your dreams don't fit your paycheck. But this resort is changing. Because I'm living proof that floors and ceilings are made of the same material. You can break through either one." There was applause. Some tears. Even laughter when Marcus shouted, "So can we get better coffee now?" But underneath the humor, something real had shifted. The same resort that once symbolized exclusion had become a story of transformation. And as I walked outside that evening, the ocean breeze hit me again. The same one from that first line of my story. Only now it didn't smell like someone else's dream. It smelled like mine. Dear audience, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to give it a like. It really helps this channel grow and reach more story lovers like you. In the weeks that followed, life slowed down in the most surreal way. For years I'd been running, chasing, climbing, surviving. Now for the first time I could breathe. Not because everything was perfect, but because I was finally free from proving my worth. The resort changed, slowly but beautifully. We replaced marble vanity with meaning. I introduced staff wellness programs, fair pay, and flexible schedules. The same break room where employees once whispered complaints, now echoed with laughter. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rewriting the system that once dismissed people like me. Marcus became the new operations manager. I told him, "You believed before anyone else did. You're not just part of this story. You helped write it." He laughed. "Well, boss, just promise me one thing. No more all-nighters over budget sheets." I smiled. No promises. But the biggest moment, the one I'd been quietly waiting for, came 2 months later. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the resort was hosting its annual summer brunch. Families, tourists, even locals came to enjoy the music, the food, the ocean view. Among the guests was Mom. She'd been invited by one of her friends, not realizing who the new owner was. When I saw her step into the lobby, I froze. She looked around, eyes wide. "Wow," she said to her friend, "this place is something else." "My dream vacation spot," her friend smiled. "Oh, didn't you hear? It's owned by a young woman now. Local girl. I think her name's Amelia something." Mom stopped mid-step. Her hand trembled. And when our eyes met across the room, I saw every year of misunderstanding between us reflected back. Her fear, my defiance, our silence. I walked toward her. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, You own this place?" I nodded. "Yeah, for 3 years now." Her lip quivered. "I told you it was above our class." I smiled softly. "You were right." "Back then?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I just didn't want you to get hurt, Amelia. The world isn't kind to girls like us." "I know," I said, but maybe that's why I had to make a kinder world. We stood there in the middle of the lobby. No arguments, no pride, just two women finally understanding each other after a lifetime of misunderstanding. She reached for my hand. "I'm proud of you." And for the first time, I believed her. That afternoon, we sat on the balcony overlooking the ocean, the same view that once felt unreachable. Mom sipped her iced tea, silent for a long time. Finally, she said, "It's beautiful, Amelia. You did this." I looked at her, smiled. "No, Mom, we did this." "You gave me grit. I just gave it direction." The wind picked up, brushing through her silver hair, and she laughed, really laughed, for the first time in years. It wasn't just a moment of pride. It was healing. Months passed, and the resort thrived. Not because it was the fanciest, but because it had heart. We hosted charity events for single mothers, scholarships for young architects, and mentorships for hospitality workers who wanted more than just a paycheck. I made sure every cleaner, server, and front desk clerk knew the story of the girl who once mopped those same floors. Not to boast, but to remind them that no one's place in life is permanent. I often think about that little apartment, the one with peeling paint and humming refrigerators. It wasn't luxury, but it was the beginning of everything. It built the woman who could stand in a boardroom and not flinch. I still visit sometimes, not out of nostalgia, but gratitude, because every ceiling I hit started there, and every lesson I learned began with no. A year later, I was invited to speak at a women's business conference. The theme was redefining power. I stood on stage, facing hundreds of faces that mirrored my old fears. Women juggling bills, kids, self-doubt, and dreams too heavy to carry alone, I said. "They told me class defines you. But class is just a word people use when they can't handle your courage. Don't wait to be invited to the table. Build your own, and make it big enough for others to sit with you." The crowd rose to their feet. Some clapped, some cried. But all I could think about was Mom sitting in the front row, her eyes glistening with pride. Today, the resort isn't just a business, it's a symbol. We've opened 2 more along the coast, both run by women who once worked as cleaners, cooks, and receptionists. They're not above their class. They've redefined it. As for me, I no longer chase success the way I used to. I spend more time mentoring young women, teaching them how to turn rejection into strategy. Because that's the real inheritance, the ability to build something lasting from broken pieces. I still wake up early some mornings, walk barefoot across the lobby, and run my hand along the marble counter. It reminds me of every rag I ever held, every floor I ever scrubbed, every no that led me here. Mom visits often now. Sometimes she sits by the pool, sipping lemonade, pretending to be just another guest. And every time she checks in, she insists on paying. For pride, she says. I let her, because some victories are meant to be quiet. Once she turned to me and said, "You know, I used to think this place was above us, but maybe all along it was waiting for you." I didn't have an answer, just a smile and a deep breath that tasted like freedom. From mopping floors to owning the view, from silence to strength. That's my story. Not a fairy tale, not luck. Just faith, grit, and a little bit of irony. The girl who once stood outside the resort gates now holds the keys. And she doesn't just open doors for herself anymore, she leaves them open for others. Thanks for watching, story lovers. If Amelia's journey touched you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that no dream is ever above your class. They used to call her too ambitious for her class, too loud for her background, too soft for business. Funny how time changes what too much really means. Because when the same people checked into the resort years later, they didn't recognize the owner. They just admired the design, the hospitality, the peace of the place, never realizing it was built by the woman they once dismissed. And that's the quiet poetry of life. The ones you overlook often build the foundations you stand on. Amelia never chased revenge. She didn't need to prove anything. Her success wasn't about proving her mother wrong. It was about proving that kindness and courage belong in power. She turned her pain into a platform, her story into structure. and her struggle into a sanctuary for others like her. But life had one more surprise waiting. A few months ago, the state's tourism board held its annual Hospitality Visionaries Gala. Among the nominees, CEOs, real estate tycoons, old money with familiar names. And in the final announcement, the award for transformative leadership in hospitality went to Amelia Ross. She stood on stage, the lights bright, the applause echoing. And when she took the mic, she didn't thank investors or consultants. She thanked the janitors, the servers, the night shift, and one person in particular. "To my mother," she said, "who taught me that class isn't a category, it's character." The crowd went silent, then rose to their feet. And somewhere in the front row, her mother wiped away tears. So what do we learn from Amelia's story? That you don't have to fit into a class to have class. That dignity isn't bought. It's earned in silence, struggle, and grace. That the view from the top only matters when you remember who's still climbing. So next time you see someone quietly working behind the scenes, remember, they might not be where they belong yet. They might just be building where they belong. Because sometimes, the woman they said would never belong ends up owning the very view they once used to keep her out. Thanks for watching, story lovers.